go back and show you how to polish the Sew Steady table. This is what we call our acrylic insert and table polish. And mine is almost empty. And you only need about a quarter-size dot there. And the polish comes just like this. It's called table and insert polish, or sometimes we just call it acrylic shine because that's what it does. And so I'm going to take the little cloth that comes with it, and I'm just going to rub that all over my table. And it's more than just making the table look good. It actually makes it so our fabric slides a whole lot easier on our table. So you can see I'm reaching through and getting all of the surface shined up with that. And then I'm simply going to turn over my cloth and I'm going to polish that up. Now I've got a little microfiber cloth over here that I just picked up, and I think it works really well too. So I'm going to use that and give it kind of its final polish up. I had you cut, or I've given you the information for the details. You will need to select, in this case, 2 different fabrics, and you will cut squares. You will cut 11-inch squares. And if you're going to do 4 circles, you're going to have 4 squares of each color. So you can actually do this in multiple colors, but for what we're doing today and for what I would recommend your first project is you would only choose 2 because it can get a little bit confusing. So the first thing that I have done is cut those squares. I have 4 squares of the red print for Christmas, and I have 4 squares of the solid. Sorry about that. I don't know what got a hold of me. I have already taken the time to polish up my table. And if you've not heard me talk about that, the tables need to be polished. I'm using my Sew Steady tables for this project, and I've used my table polish. I put about a quarter-size dot on there, and then I used the cloth that came with it to polish the whole table up. So what I'm going to do first is I am going to make those bundles, or if you look at your instructions, it's step number 1. So after you've cut your squares, you will also have 4 squares of fusible fleece. Now if you've not used the fusible fleece before, I use the Pellon, as I stated on there, 987F. You will find this is a great help in when you're trying to do something such as placemats or table runners because it's going to allow you to have stability and not have to worry about the switching around or movement of your batting. So you're going to fuse 2 squares of the solid, or 2 squares of the fusible to the solid and 2 squares to the print. And when you've done that, then you're going to make 4 sandwiches. So you would have 2 that were like this, fusible, plain, and then the solid, or what I call the secondary and the main fabric. And you would have 2 the other way. 2 would have fusible on this side and fusible and just the plain on the other. So I have taken the time to already do this. I flipped this over and I just took a long enough ruler to draw the X in the center there. So I just went both ways. I would encourage you to not make it quite as dark as I did, because if you make it that dark and you have a light fabric on the back, you might not get this all out and you might be able to see it. So don't make it quite as dark. I had to do that for the camera purposes, because this is going to be where we put our pin from our circle sewing tool. So you're going to make those 4 layered up sets, And then we are going to be stitching 10-inch circles. Now, if you don't have a circle sewing table or a sew study table that has the circle sewing abilities, you're going to want to either draw or use something that's close to 10 inches in diameter to do that. We're going to just measure 5 inches out. And if you have this grid on your table like I do, I know that that line right there is 5 inches. So this spot is right at 5 inches. If not, take something that you have and put the 0 right at your needle and measure out 5 inches. You can see right there I have my 5-inch line. So that's the spot that I need to have so that it's going to be an exact 10-inch circle. So I'm going to now take this and find that X there and place that down right on top. Make sure I've got it in there. And when I set this pin on here, or the pin more on here, I'm not putting it completely down because this needs to be able to go around. And whenever I do this, I test to make sure that my circle is going to be all on my fabric. And then at that point, all we're going to do, again remembering this is not completely down, is we set the foot down and just use a 2.5 stitch length. And I just take my hands and kind of keep smoothing this out. I don't sew it at a top speed. But we're just going right around that circle. We're going to be doing this 4 times. And this is kind of like those cooking shows. I've already completed the other 3 because we don't need to see all of those being stitched. So we're just stitching around. We're almost there. And I'm back to where I started, so I'm going to overlap just a few stitches. You could backstitch. It'll backstitch on this, but overlapping is just fine. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut my threads. And at that point, if I had more to do, which I don't, normally you would be doing 3 more of these, we can just lift this right off of here, put our next one on, put the little pin more, but not completely down, and do another one. But at this point, I'm actually finished with this one. I'm going to turn it over so you can see what I've got here. And the next step is I'm going to use pinking shears. Now, when I was doing this today, I found out something that I just haven't paid attention to before, and that is when you're cutting this, whether this is batting or a fusible fleece, it's going to be cut easier if that's on the top. In other words, the batting part is on the top. So for some reason, it just seemed to cut a whole lot easier by having that on top. So when you're doing this, the reason I recommend pinking shears is because it turns so nicely. It pretty much notches everything and allows for the right amount of space. So you can see, I'll set that right there so you can see it a little bit better. I'm pretty much right up close to it. It's like I'm leaving a little less than 1/4 inch. You don't want to get so close that your teeth of your pinking shears touch your circle. This is one of those projects that's so easy, you know, when you have some time coming up, like right now as we're still into fall breaks in our area for schools, this would be a good one to do with your kids or your grandkids because they could help out with this project. So since I'm finished with this, I'm going to take this out. And the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to look at those templates that I gave you. So one of the templates that I gave you looked like this. And on that template, I couldn't do the whole circle, but you really don't need the whole circle. All we need is to be able to line this up with our stitching and know that that is where we want the placement. So it would be something like this. So I really don't need that out there. If I'm doing quite a few of these, I would definitely draw this on template plastic and cut this open. The easiest way to cut this open is you can use a rotary cutter. I have one rotary cutter that I only use for template plastic and paper. And you can cut just two close together and then just cut the ends of that. Or you could use an X-Acto knife to do that. So that's the way that you can prepare your template for this. I already know where these need to be, so I'm just going to turn this over because I like to follow the grain lines. You're going to be cutting on the fleece. But if you can tell the grain lines, I can tell that this one goes just like this. So the grain of the fabric is going this way and this way. So if you had a directional fabric, you'd really want to pay attention to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flip this over, knowing that that was the grain line, and that is approximately where we need. So that template would give you that indication. So what I'm going to do from there, remember we're on the fleece side and that's fused. So I'm just going to come to this end and pick that up and make sure I don't have the bottom layer by feeling through it, and I'm just going to cut that to get it started. And then I'm going to take my small scissors and just cut right through that section. I'm going to turn this around and cut a little farther this way. And you can see that I haven't cut through that back layer. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn all of this through that opening. While I'm doing this, has anybody got any questions so far? And remember, the fleece is actually on the right side of the circle. So right now what I'm going to do is get my point turner and creaser, and I'm just going to go around this on the inside. I actually put my hand right on the inside. And you'd be surprised how easy this is to do. And really, this is one of those projects you can kind of teach the kids to do, because this is something that makes this lay a whole lot nicer. So I'm going to go ahead and lay this nice and flat. And you can see that that really isn't fighting me or anything. And then we're going to move over here to the ironing board. And what I'm going to be doing is pressing this so that the edges are all nice. This is the right side up. Remember, I told you the cut's on the right side. So we're going to just give it a little bit of a steam. And because that's fusible fleece instead of batting, it's just going to lay so nice for you. I hit the wrong button and I shot some water out there, so I'm going to have to dry that off. And then what we're going to be doing is, on the supply list, it had a little bit of Heat and Bond Light or something similar. And this is a 1" by 4" strip. And what I'm going to do is open up this slot. The first time I did these, I didn't do this, and it made it for a little bit of difficulty after that. So I'm putting half of it on one side and half on the other, and laying it back down so that lays right back together. I'm going to give it a little shot of steam. And because it's actually closest to the other side, I'm just going to flip it over, and right where that's at, give it a good steam. Now, if I had all of these here together, I would just be working through them, and I would just set this aside and go to the next one. But since I don't have the others because I've already done those, I want to wait just a second, because if this is too warm, when I go to pull this off, it will come with it. But it's okay, so I'm just pulling that out, laying this right back together and pressing that. And like I said, this will make it easier later. So I think I'll show you the next step while we're here at this point. And that is you're going to find the second template. And this is actually half of a 10-inch square. And it's not really a 10-inch square. I want to tell you how to do this so that if you had other sizes of circles, you could do it. We are using a 10-inch diameter. So what we need to do is realize that the radius is 5 inches. And the way we determine the size of the square, because this square would be over that way, is we measure from the center out that radius distance. So if you were to measure from here to here, it's 5 inches. From there to there, it's 5 inches. So that's the way we are going to determine how we do our template. So here is my template that I have drawn from that. And all I did was I actually used my crosshair grid for my templates. And I just drew this line, measured 5 inches out, and then used that to connect. So when I set this on to my circle, this is going to determine where I actually stitch. So I'm going to come back over to the sewing machine now. And we're going to pick up another circle. So what we're going to be doing is taking this circle, because this is the right side, and we are going to look, excuse me, this is the right side here. We are going to put the two right sides out. So in other words, here's where this one here is been slashed. And I would have to come over to this one to find where this has been slashed. And so you want those slashes on top of one another. And then I'm going to just take this and lay this on the back so you can see it. Yours won't be quite as close as that, but this won't matter. It will be just fine. And this is going to be my stitching line. So what I'm going to do is my machine is still set for a straight stitch. I'm going to set this on the fabric. I'm going to sew just a little bit forward, and then I'm going to go to the edge with the reverse, and I'm going to come back forward on that line. When I come to the edge, I'm going to back stitch, and then I'm just going to go ahead and cut my threads. So now you can see how we used this sitting right on our circle to determine where we were going to stitch. So that way, every single time, our little flaps will be the same. Now I'm going to cut off these threads. You can see on this side, that is where I have my slash. It's not going to matter because those are going to get turned underneath. So I'm trimming my threads out, and I'll be right back. So what I'm doing is I'm at the ironing board using steam. And I simply, this was like this was like this. I laid this back open. Now what that did in there, why we put that little piece of heat and bond light, was to keep this flat up underneath there so it didn't move out. And trust me, it makes a big difference. Now I've already done the other pair. It's here like this. So in order to put this together, we are going to put the wrong sides together. Lay it right on top, and you want to get this edge even and that. So right here is where we want to make sure we've got them together. And then at that point, I can set this on top, right on that seam, and know that now And again, this is an iron-off marker, but it doesn't matter because it's on the underside. I'm going to mark that straight line, and I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to continue that line on across. Remember, you're looking at the right sides now. We're going to stitch this. Make sure. Yeah, we're good. We're going to come forward a few and go back a few. And you could use clips to hold your fabrics together, or they pretty much will lay right side by side. And you notice we're going right through the intersection there of all of those, and that's what we want. And it's so crucial to use that template so that everything is going to lay correctly. So I'm going to trim those threads off. And this is what we have at this point. So I'm going to press these two down and I'll be right back. So, what I'm going to do next is the stitching on this that's going to hold these flanges down. And while I'm changing my bobbin and getting ready for that, I will tell you that if you have a blind hem foot, that's going to be your best friend for this kind of stitching. So I am going to replace my foot with my blind hem foot. And I'll set it over here so you can see what a blind hem foot looks like. It's usually high on the left side and low on the right side. So what I'm going to be doing is using it as my guide. Now I want to use some decorative thread for this. And for this actual technique, you could either use a decorative stitch, a straight stitch. You could use the heirloom applique stitch, or what some people call the buttonhole stitch. Any of those will be just fine for what we're doing. So what I'm going to do is actually start in the center. And on the instructions, I tell you to just trace your fingers so you can see how it's going to work, because I'm going to go all the way around and come back and stop right there dead in the center. So when I do this, I'm going to move over a little bit so you can get the camera right in there. I'm going to set my machine for a left needle position. So if you can see where that's at, when I put that foot down, the foot is riding against that, and my needle, I'm actually going to even move it closer to the center. So as you can see that needle moving, when I put that needle down, I'm just catching the very edge of my fabric. So I'm going to do a straight stitch around this, and you can see how easy this is to do with that foot. So some of you on your blind hem foot, you may not adjust the needle position, you may actually adjust something on your foot. And when I get to the point, I leave the needle in, and I'm going to rotate this, and this time you'll be able to see that stitching right on the edge of the fabric. So if you want to see more of the stitching, just leave that needle in farther. And as you see, I'm coming around here. I want to make sure my needle stays in the down position. Remember, when I come to this intersection, I'm going to leave the needle down. My foot actually comes up enough that I can pivot. You might have to raise yours up a little bit to pivot. And this is where, if you wanted to, you could use a decorative stitch. The other one that I'm going to show you here in a minute has a different stitch on it. You can already see how it's holding those down. I've got one more to go. And then I'm going to give you I'm going to show you another one that I did with is more of a table runner. And then I'm going to give you a sneak peek on something. Since this is a closed group, I can do this. You just can't share it anywhere else. It's not going to be coming out until after Christmas. So I'm back to the beginning. I'm going to do the same thing as you would normally do, and that's a back stitch. Nobody's going to be able to tell it. I'm going to go ahead and cut that thread. And just that quickly, we have created that table mat. So you can see how that top stitching was right on the edge just by using that foot.